Human civilization is locking itself in the most fierce and desperate survival race of all time, where the entire value of existence is converted into the volume of action and the ability to intervene in the objective world. Eastern philosophy identifies this extreme belief system with a sharp-term way. We are educated and molded from childhood to dogmatically believe that humans are the center of the universe, the masters of reality, and our ultimate responsibility is to continuously bend shape and force all things to operate exactly according to the script drafted by the ego. Under the lens of dualism, the human mind always views nature and living conditions as rough objects needing to be conquered and tamed. We make detailed schedules for the future. We use our will to bend relationships. We set up countless barriers, rules, and artificial moral systems, hoping to freeze the impermanent flow of life. Humans arrogantly believe that just by adding enough actions, just by straining to intervene deeply enough, we will build a perfect order and absolute safety for our fragile I. However, when the drill of phenomenology pierces through the glamorous shell of civilization, a cruel ontological tragedy is instantly exposed. Frantically maintaining the way state does not bring peace or order, as humanity always hallucinates, but conversely it is the giant machine crushing the vitality of the entire species. The universe is inherently an interwoven network of dense causal conditions operating in a natural wild rhythm that cannot be manipulated by any single individual will. When an individual uses their tiny I to fight against the grand thrust of the entire ecosystem, existential friction begins to arise. This friction is exactly like trying to use your bare hands to build a sand wall to block the fierce waves of the ocean. The harder you try to build the dike, the more the waves smash it. The more you strain to control, the more unexpected variables of reality appear and tear apart all plans. The state of torment, stress, anxiety, and ultimate exhaustion of modern humans does not arise from material shortages, but arises from the very bloody friction between the controlling desire of the ego and the uncontrollable nature of the impermanent flow. We are killing ourselves by continuously swimming against the ocean current. Over 2,500 years ago, amidst the extreme decline and chaos of the Zhou dynasty, Laozi quietly observed this way tragedy of humanity and summarized it in the masterpiece Tao Te Ching. Not bearing the appearance of a vague immortal preaching mystical dogmas, Laozi appeared as a cold, existential thinker, a person holding a surgical scalpel, going straight into the cognitive tumor of the era. He witnessed rulers trying to restore order by issuing thousands more harsh laws, moralists trying to save society by inventing countless cumbersome ritual principles. But Laozi, with his piercing vision, pointed out a cruel paradox. The more laws are set, the more thieves society produces. The more brutally we intervene in the operation of all things, the faster the order collapses. He realized that all additive efforts, all artificial coercion to rearrange the world are acts of destroying the integrity and perfect self-balance of nature. The more humans try to make everything better according to their subjective reference system, the more they push everything sliding down into the deep abyss of chaos. The incurable disease of the human mind is the blind belief in the power of addition. We solve pain by seeking more frivolous pleasures. We handle emptiness by accumulating more assets and social relationships. We cope with the chaos caused by using more sophisticated and cruel methods. Like someone trapped in a swamp, the more panic they struggle, the more they try to use muscle power to escape, the deeper they sink to the dark, muddy bottom. Laozi understood that no straining effort can rescue humans from the prison of clinging. Using the ego to fix the ego is a complete logical dead end. To truly reverse this exhaustion process, humanity does not need to learn any new action skill, but must execute a radical cognitive overthrow, completely cancelling the belief in intervention. Instead of continuing to look outward to seek materials to build the ego wall, we must bravely turn around, facing a spatial dimension completely alien to dualistic thinking. Laozi's philosophy invites humans to drop all weapons, stop all hopeless battles with reality, and step into a state of absolute stillness to contemplate the grand beauty of absence. If the root of all suffering is the tightness of molding and coercing behaviors, then the only cure is the accommodating power of emptiness. Right at the moment, the mind stops struggling. When the controlling will is completely neutralized, a supreme operating principle of the universe begins to reveal itself. That principle has no shape, cannot be grasped, cannot be weighed or measured, but is the nurturing and coordinating source of the birth and death of tens of thousands of stars, as well as every breath of the tiniest living being. Laozi called that hidden, invisible and soundless principle by a single noun, the Tao. So what ontological power does this indefinable, silent, empty space actually contain? And by what sharp dialectic could Laozi prove that it is the nothingness that is the core, building all the value of the being, and it is the empty space that shapes all things in the universe? Part 2. To decode the power of stillness amid a world spinning in a vortex of action, we must face the central concept, the Tao. In human thought flow, people always cling to tangible things that can be touched or defined. We worship the being and shun nothingness. But with a piercing vision of reality, Laozi outlined a contrary path. He affirmed that the Tao is not a God on a high throne or a material entity. The Tao is the original operating principle, the silent flow of the universe. Laozi called it nameless because any noun is too narrow to contain it. The Tao exists before heaven and earth, the mother of all things. But it never claims titles or shows power. It operates everything silently, letting all things be born, grow and change without brutal intervention. The silence of Tao is not death but a full energy state, the origin of all movement in life. Laozi's ontological revolution lies in the sharp dialectic of emptiness. He pointed out a ironic truth that human perception is always enchanted by visible matter but blind to the power of the void. Look at the 30 spokes of a wheel. We see the hardness of wood, the connection. But Laozi reminded that the empty space in the axle allows the wheel to turn and function for movement. Without that void, the wheel is just a useless wood block. Observe a bowl molded from clay. We touch the rim, admire patterns, but the true value lies in the space inside it. The nothingness is what contains water and food, not the clay matter. Similarly, when building a house, we focus on bricks, walls and pillars, but we only live in the empty spaces of windows and doors. If a house has no void, it becomes a solid material block and cannot be inhabited. This dialectic smashes dualism, affirming that being creates shape but nothingness creates value and true nature. From the material world, Laozi pushed perception to the existential dimension. He realized the human mind operates exactly like a bowl or house. Our tragedy is letting the mind house be filled with prejudices, cravings, borrowed knowledge and fear. A stuffed mind has no void to receive the original wisdom of the Tao. When you carry a fixed design of how life must be, you close the windows of perception before the flexible turns of reality. The power of void in the mind is the ability to contain all without clinging. It is like a flat mirror because it is empty. It reflects all images truthfully without leaving a scratch. When you dare drop the ego label's face your own emptiness, you do not become poorer. Conversely, you become the still axle, allowing the wheel of life to turn smoothly amid chaos. Emptiness in Laozi's philosophy also contains a great coordinating power called softness. While humanity strives to build a sharp ego, Laozi praised the power of humility and femininity. He used the valley image to metaphor the Tao. The valley, because it is low and empty, can receive and contain water from high mountains. Not competing for the highest position, the valley becomes the richest place. Modern humans are exhausted, wanting to be peaks, wanting the highest control. We forget the peak is lonely and unstable, while the empty valley nurtures life enduringly. Understanding the void power is not a call to be useless, but an ontological strategy to attain supreme strength through humility and emptiness. When you are nothing, you can become everything. When you keep nothing, the universe becomes yours. Realizing the value of emptiness is the turning point to liberate humans from the way prison. If the Tao operates through a silent void and non-intervention power, then a cruel question is posed for us. How can an individual trapped in money cycles and social competition apply this emptiness to action? Does a method exist where we still finish work and reach goals, but without any effort, like how nature nurtures all things without claiming? What exactly is that mysterious yet powerful art? And how can one reach the state of acting without acting to attain all without trade off of own exhaustion? Part 3. The concept of Wu Wei by Laozi is perhaps one of the most distorted, misunderstood, and wronged philosophical terms in the history of human thought. When facing this term, the dualistic thinking of modern humans immediately equates it with laziness, abandonment, a pessimistic, surrendered attitude, and a lifestyle of denying responsibility. We imagine hermits escaping the world, sitting motionless in dark caves and contributing absolutely no material value to the operation of society. But that is an extremely crude and flawed interpretation. If Wu Wei truly was doing nothing, then the Tao Te Ching would not have become the bedside manual of emperors, strategists, and great figures who built dynasties under the phenomenological lens. Wu Wei is not the negation of action, but the supreme realm of the art of action. It is the refinement from a state of friction action to a state of traceless action. The word Wu here does not mean an absolute zero, but it means no forcing, no artificiality, and not being manipulated by the ego's greed. To dissect the massive difference between Wei action and Wu Wei action, we must dissect the core motive hidden deep beneath all behaviors. In the Wei state, all human actions are led by a subject named the I and burned by the fuel of fear or greed. When you work in a Wei state, you are not truly present with that work. Your mind projects into the future, worrying whether the result of this work will bring you promotion, bring the admiration of others, or help you avoid punishment. The ego continuously intervenes, straining to mold the execution process to fit its illusory expectations. This very brutal intervention creates a massive psychological friction force eroding vitality and creating extreme stress. You complete the work, but you leave a heavy psychological footprint full of exhaustion and resentment. Conversely, Wu Wei action is a state where the ego has been completely stripped from the equation. You act simply because the present moment demands an action, just like eating when hungry, drinking when thirsty, wearing clothes when cold. There is no subject standing out demanding recognition. There is no expectation trap set in the future. When the ego retreats, a magical ontological phenomenon appears. The distance between the acting subject and the acting object is completely blurred. In Wu Wei philosophy, the carpenter and the woodblock are no longer two separate and antagonistic entities. The artisan does not use his subjective will to force the wood to become a strained shape. Instead, he enters a state of absolute stillness, listens to the wood grain, flows with its natural lines, and lets the artwork's shape automatically reveal itself through his hands. At this time, the carpenter is no longer working, but he becomes a pure conduit for the Tao to operate. The action occurs smoothly, perfectly optimizing energy without generating any resistance force. This philosophy proves that the greatest masterpieces of humanity, from art and science to management, are never born from the tense straining of an ambitious ego. They are only born in moments of absolute emptiness, when humans drop themselves into the flow of the universe, allowing the action to complete itself. That is the state of acting without acting, an infinite creative power, but leaving absolutely no trace of arrogance or clinging. The natural universe is the greatest master of the Wu Wei art. Observe how all things operate. Spring comes, grass and trees automatically sprout. A seed lying deep under the soil has no strategic plan for development. It does not stay awake stressed and fearing it cannot bloom. It also does not strain, draining its vitality to push out each leaf. It simply lies there, receiving sunlight, receiving raindrops, and letting the natural vitality do its work. The earth still silently orbits the sun for billions of years with absolute precision, without needing any artificial engine or complex operating system. Nature completes all the greatest and most complex constructions silently, without showing off, without claiming merit. All things automatically transform, automatically change, and automatically reach their optimal point without a single forced drop of sweat. Laozi saw this perfect operation and pointed out a sharp truth: human intervention, the arrogant way of the intellect, is the only agent breaking the balance of the Tao. Applying Wu Wei philosophy to today's chaotic world does not demand us to abandon jobs or flee into deep forests. It demands a profound cognitive transformation in how we interact with reality. That is the art of supreme patience, knowing how to keep silent and allowing all things to automatically move to their mature point without sticking hands in to intervene too early. In management, a Wu Wei leader knows how to establish a self-generating environment, removes all cumbersome binding rules, and lets employees automatically maximize their original capacity. In education, a Wu Wei teacher does not stuff knowledge into students' heads violently, but only plays the role of awakening curiosity so students discover truth themselves. And in personal life, a Wu Wei practitioner throws away the illusion of having to control the future. They do not swim against the rapid current to invite exhaustion and despair. They lie back, flowing with the grand thrust of the ecological current, and use minimal effort to steer themselves to The destination most calmly, however if non-forcing, is the core of Wu Wei. Does any physical symbol exist in this world representing that flexibility and absolute power? What is the softest, weakest thing, never competing, always voluntarily flowing to the lowest places but carrying a destructive power, enough to pierce through even the hardest rock blocks of time? Part 4. To help a mind already too familiar with the roughness of the material world visualize the invisible power of the Tao, Laozi pointed to the most common natural entity with the deepest ontological paradox is water. In the Tao Te Ching he concluded a beautiful truth: the highest good is like water, meaning the highest realm of perfection has characteristics exactly like water. Under the existential philosophical lens, water is the most complete physical manifestation of Wu Wei philosophy. The first great characteristic of water is the complete absence of a fixed shape. Water does not cling to any ontological identity. You pour water into a square cup, it becomes square. You pour water into a round vase, it instantly becomes round. This absolute compatibility is not weakness or losing oneself but the pinnacle of flexibility. Water wastes absolutely no energy straining to maintain an artificial shape. By abandoning the illusion of a rigid eye, water can freely merge, slip through and fill all empty spaces of reality without generating any negative friction force. However, the softness of water does not mean harmless weakness. Conversely, Laozi used water to establish a cruel dialectic, completely smashing humanity's prejudices about strength. Humans always worship hardness, solidity and greatness. We build fortresses with boulders, forge swords with steel and train our egos with a rigid shell to withstand life. But observe a confrontation between water and a boulder in wild nature. When a water stream flows through a canyon and is blocked by a giant boulder, that boulder represents solidity, the challenging way state. What does water do? Water does not get angry. Water does not declare war. Water does not strain to create a direct collision to destroy the rock. The water stream simply slips through the gaps, wraps around the rock, glides on its surface most smoothly and continues its journey to the great ocean. Yet behind that smooth, yielding and completely harmless appearance lies an unstoppable, destructive power. Over thousands of years, the continuous and frictionless flow of water will erode, cut and crush that proud boulder into tiny sand grains. The hardest thing in the world is completely defeated by the softest thing in the world. Invincible strength does not lie in the sudden violence of a collision, but lies in the endurance of a flow, carrying no judgment or resentment. From the phenomenology of water, Laozi outlined an existential survival and management strategy: the art of humility. The human ego is always obsessed with peaks. It craves to climb to towering positions of fame, to stand on others' heads, to be illuminated by the blinding light of admiration. But water is completely the opposite. The innate characteristic of water is to always seek the lowest, deepest, darkest and muddiest places that humans always despise and reject. Water does not compete for high status. Water voluntarily lowers itself below all things. But precisely because of that ultimate humility, water built a grand gathering power. Laozi posed a sharp question: why can the great ocean be the king of hundreds of rivers, making hundreds of rivers voluntarily pour water into it? The answer is extremely simple: because the ocean lies lower than all rivers. By lowering itself to the lowest position, the ocean opens an infinite accommodating space, winning all the resources of heaven and earth. The awakened person acts exactly like water. They do not need to strain to prove strength, do not need to compete for attention. They step back lower. The ego use tolerance to contain all judgments, and that absolute humility turns them into the center, attracting the respect and power of the entire collective. To completely smash human illusions about muscle strength and stubbornness, Laozi continued to give a cruel biological observation about the cycle of life and death. He exposed the nature of life and death through the dialectic of hard and soft. When a human is just born, the body of a newborn is extremely soft, flexible, and supple. But when a human ages and breathes their last breath, the corpse instantly becomes stiff, cold, and rigid. Similarly, in the plant world, when a sprout just emerges from the ground, it is extremely soft, fragile, and full of life sap. But when the tree dies, its branches become dry, hard, and extremely brittle. From there, Laozi drew a universal truth: whatever is rigid, straining, and stubborn is always the companion of death. Whatever is soft, flexible, and yielding is truly the representative of life. You can look into your own mouth to verify this truth. Teeth are the hardest, most solid, and sharpest things to tear food. But when you age, teeth will chip and fall out. The tongue is the softest thing, having no bone frame, always slipping and bending, but the tongue will survive intact with you until the last day of life. Hardness only brings a temporary defensive shell, but softness brings eternal survival capability. Applying the philosophy of water to modern life is the sharpest practical method to neutralize all attacks from the outside world. When you face an insult, an attack, or a massive pressure from work, if you use a rigid ego to resist, you are creating a collision between two boulders. Both will shatter and suffer heavy damage. But if you transform your mind into water, you will absorb that attacking force, wrap around it, glide past it, without leaving any damage. In your ontological structure, you step back not because you are cowardly, but you step back to create empty space, using the opponent's own strength to neutralize the opponent, exactly like the art of Tai Chi. However, if the softness, tolerance, humility, and nurturing of water are the keys to touching the Tao, then it points out a severe misalignment in humanity's value system. We have been building a world dominated by the aggression, expansion, dryness, and violence of extreme masculinity. Is the ultimate rescue for the exhaustion of this civilization, a journey backwards, abandoning the rigidity of a mature man to seek the energy of original femininity and the carefree, empty state of a newborn infant. Part 5. The final peak of the cognitive revolution, named Wu Wei, does not lie in humans having to continuously move forward to conquer, but it is a backward journey to return to the origin. Laozi perceived the universe as constituted and operated through the rhythmic interaction of two original energy sources, yin and yang. Yang represents masculinity, it is light, expansion, logic, rigidity, attack, and the craving to control all things. Conversely, yin represents femininity, it is darkness, accommodation, stillness, softness, retreat, and the ability to nurture all species. Under the phenomenological lens, modern humanity is suffering an extremely severe ontological disease. We have been building a civilization fanatic about masculinity and completely alienating femininity. All social structures, all educational systems, and all contemporary living philosophies promote aggressive rising. The power of intervening will continuously shining and crushing other individuals to win the right to survive. This terrible misalignment is the cause pushing the entire ecological system of the earth and the human nervous system into a grand annihilation. We are burning ourselves in the brilliant but cruel fire of the way ego to restore order and save souls exhausted by friction. Laozi offered a radical subversive cure. Know the strength of masculinity, but voluntarily choose to keep the weakness of femininity. Returning to femininity in the Tao Te Ching absolutely carries no pessimistic gender meaning, but it is an existential cognitive state at the ultimate level. The Tao practitioner abandons the craving to be a peak, to voluntarily be a deep valley. The valley does not need to strain to shine. It is silent, dark and empty, but that very emptiness allows it to receive all water sources from hundreds of rivers. Femininity is the source of reproduction. It does not create things by violently carving or coercing, but it patiently nurtures things in the silence of darkness. When an individual dares to shed the heavy armor of stubbornness, stops having to continuously prove themselves sharp and talented, they will enter a space of absolute tolerance. Their mind becomes a womb of the universe where all conflicts, all attacks, all adversities are embraced, transformed and neutralized without needing a single bit of resisting force. The second metaphor Laozi used to describe the perfection of Wu Wei is the image of a newborn infant. For the adult mindset, the infant is a symbol of weakness, ignorance and needs protection. But under Laozi's philosophical vision, the infant is the most ontologically perfect entity because it has not been infected and molded by society into a Wei machine. The newborn infant has soft bones and muscles, no physical strength, but the vitality inside. It is abundant and absolutely intact. It cries all day without getting hoarse. It grips its hands very tightly without using willpower to strain. The infant has no shaped ego. It does not judge the world into right or wrong, ugly or beautiful. It interacts with reality in a carefree, empty state, eating when hungry, crying when sad, forgetting instantly after crying without clinging or holding grudges in its heart. Conversely, an adult has muscular strength, has a tough shell, but the vitality inside is exhausted. The mind is always torn by regrets in the past and obsessions in the future. The journey of cultivating the Tao is not an effort to become greater or more erudite, but a continuous process of washing away artificial labels, peeling off the dry, rigid prejudices of society to return to being an infant with a pure soul, blending as one with the rhythm of nature. The cognitive transformation from Wei to Wu Wei was finally applied by Laozi to the pinnacle of existential management and leadership. The most enlightened ruler or manager is not someone who rules by martial law, by micromanagement or by fear. Those are inferior methods only, generating resistance and hidden chaos. The supreme leader is someone whose existence seems unknown to the people. The Wu Wei leader manages an organization or a nation, exactly how nature manages the universe, establishing a self-generating, nurturing environment, removing all unreasonable, prohibitive barriers and letting the human flow automatically seek its optimal point. When the work is excellently completed, when the organization achieves great prosperity, the Wu Wei leader instantly retreats into the darkness. They do not step out to claim merit, do not demand cheering, do not turn the collective achievement into a medal to pin on the chest of the ego. The people will look at those achievements and proudly exclaim, "We did it ourselves naturally." That is the ultimate power of non-intervention, completing 10 Thousand tasks without leaving any trace of domination. Closing the pages of the Tao Te Ching, we realize that Laozi's philosophy is not a pessimistic escape for losers wanting to run away from the world. Conversely, it is the sharpest, most pragmatic survival combat manual for humans being crushed by the crazy wheel of the modern era. The greatest lesson of the Wu Wei art is the awakening to a power that comes not from straining but from relaxing, not from filling but from emptying, not from advancing to seize but from retreating to accommodate. This universe is a grand flow, and you do not need to try to push the river to flow faster. You just need to let yourself float on the water and flow with its infinite thrust. Now, when the entire illusion of control has been smashed, when the arrogant ego has been dissected and stripped of all weapons, an existential door is opening wide before your eyes. Will you continue wearing the heavy iron armor, rushing into the way battle only to end in exhaustion and collapse? Or are you ready to let go, lower yourself like a silent water stream to return to the original flow and accommodate all things in your own still empty space?